Welcome to wisdom and blessing. Tonight, let your breath grow soft and your body grow heavy, as if the mattress is slowly absorbing every last worry. This story is about a monk who rose each dawn to greet the sun. Until the morning, everything went wrong, and missing the sunrise forced him to face what he'd spent years avoiding: himself. I still remember the first sunrise I didn't see. It felt like almost dying, not because the world went dark or the sky refused to lighten, but because for the first time since I entered the monastery, the light came without me. It rose over the mountains, spilled into the valley, slid across the tiled roofs and the prayer flags and the bell tower. While I lay alone in my cell, heart pounding in a darkness that wasn't outside, but inside my chest. You'd think a missed sunrise is nothing. People sleep through dawn every day. But on that mountain, at that temple, the sunrise wasn't just a pretty sky. It was a promise. It was discipline, rhythm, devotion. It was how we counted our lives. I had not missed a single one in 8 years. And then, on that particular morning, my body simply didn't rise. The night before, the wind had howled across the ridgeline, pushing its fingers through every crack in the wooden walls. I lay on my thin mat, wrapped in my worn robe, listening to the shutters rattle in their frames. Sleep didn't come easily up there. The air was thin, the cold could be cruel. But that night, my wakefulness wasn't from the weather. It was from the storm in my head. I'd been living with a quiet kind of pressure for months, a sense that everyone else was moving forward in practice while I was standing still. Younger novices sat longer than I did. Older monks seemed lighter, their laughter easier, their eyes clearer. I carried a weight I couldn't name. The more I tried to meditate it away, the heavier it became. That evening, our teacher, old Master Ren, had told us a story in the dim light of the hall. The air smelled of oil lamps and incense, that familiar mix I usually found comforting. But my nerves were already stretched thin. He said, "When I was young, I believed the sun rose because I woke for it. Every dawn, I rushed to the eastern balcony, certain that if I failed to appear, the light would somehow be less. One winter, a heavy snowstorm blocked the doors. I woke late, trapped in my room, furious with myself. I was sure I had ruined something sacred. When they finally dug me out, the sky was already bright. The sun had risen without my permission." He smiled, lines at the corners of his eyes deepening. That day I understood. The sun doesn't need me. It was I who needed it. The other monks chuckled softly. I didn't. Something tight and frightened twisted in me. I couldn't imagine missing a sunrise. Not after all the years I'd built my identity around being the one who was never late, never lax, never careless. I clung to dawn like a drowning man clings to driftwood. That night, as the wind roared, I promised myself I would be up even earlier to prove, to whom I didn't quite know, that I was still worthy. The plan was simple. When the night bell sounded, I would rise, wash, and walk the stone path to the eastern terrace, just as I always had. I pictured the familiar sequence: the cold of the floor on my bare feet, the heavy door, the first bite of icy air on my face, the long breath at the edge of the terrace as the sky shifted from black to deep blue. Instead, I lay awake too long, thoughts racing circles around the same old worries, until my mind finally slipped under like a swimmer pulled by a hidden current. Sleep took me fast and hard. I didn't hear the night bell. I didn't feel the stirring of the other monks, their quiet rustle of robes, their muted footsteps in the corridor. For the first time in nearly a decade, the monastery moved without me. When I jolted awake, it wasn't gentle. It was like surfacing from deep water, lungs burning, heart thudding wildly. Something felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. The air in my tiny cell felt too bright, the silence too full. I blinked. The thin paper window glowed with a soft, already ripened light. Bright. Not gray, not blue, but bright. No. For a breathless moment, I lay completely still, as if stillness could rewind time. Then the truth slammed into me. The pre-dawn darkness was gone. The world outside had already shifted into day. I had overslept. My first instinct was animal panic. Heat shot through my chest, even in that freezing room. I flung off the thin blanket, fumbled for my robe, my fingers clumsy, my mind already spinning out 1,000 explanations, excuses, punishments. How could I have missed it? How could I, of all people, have let the sun rise without me? I stumbled to the door and slid it open. The corridor was empty. No hurried footsteps, no low murmurs. Only distant chanting drifting up from the hall below, already in full rhythm. The kind of sound that should follow sunrise, not precede it. I rushed down the wooden steps anyway, feet slapping too loudly in a place where we were taught to move like quiet water. My breath came in sharp bursts, fogging the cold air. Shame followed me like a second shadow. As I turned the corner toward the eastern terrace, light burst across my face. The doorway ahead was edged in gold. I stepped outside, and the world opened. The sun was already high enough to paint the mountain peaks in soft fire. The sky had shifted from deep indigo to a gentle, waking blue. The village far below was washed in pale color, smoke rising from early fires in tiny, wavering threads. The snow on the distant ridges glowed as if lit from within. Beautiful. Absolutely, heartbreakingly beautiful. And I had missed its first breath. The other monks were gathered along the terrace stone, standing or sitting in silent rows. Their faces were calm, turned toward the light. No one seemed to be counting who was there and who wasn't. No one gasped when they saw me. No one glared or pointed or whispered. That almost made it worse. I felt like an intruder in a ceremony that had gone on perfectly fine without me. Slowly, trying to quiet my footsteps, I joined the line near the back, lowering myself onto the cold stone, folding my legs, forcing my breath to slow, even as my thoughts pounded like feet on a narrow path. You failed. You're careless. 8 years of discipline undone by one stupid night. My heart thudded in my chest. Each inhale felt sharp. Not even the steady warmth of the sun seemed to reach all the way into my bones. Master Wren stood at the far end of the terrace, hands tucked calmly into his sleeves. His gaze moved lightly over the group, not pausing on anyone in particular. Then, just for a moment, his eyes met mine. He didn't frown. He didn't nod. He just saw me. Something inside me flinched harder than if he'd yelled. I looked away, down to my hands resting on my knees. The skin was cracked from cold, and the knuckles reddened. These were the same hands that had held mala beads through 1,000 dawns. The same hands that had swept courtyards, poured tea, folded robes. Hands used to routine, to certainty. Now they shook just a little. The chanting from below rose and fell like the breath of some great sleeping animal. On any other morning, that sound would soothe me, anchor me. Today it felt distant, as if I were listening from behind a thick wall. In that shaky silence inside my chest, a memory surfaced. Another parable Master Ren had told us weeks ago, one I'd nodded at, but never really heard. In a village, he had said, there was a man who believed the tide came in because he walked the shore. Every morning he rose before dawn, pacing the wet sand, convinced that if he ever stayed in bed, the sea would forget to return. One winter, he fell ill. Fever bound him to his mat. The tide came in anyway, washing over the empty footprints he'd left the day before. Ren had smiled gently at us then. We like to think the world needs our rituals to keep spinning, but often it is our rituals that need the world. The sea is kind enough to let us feel important while it moves on its own. Sitting on the cold terrace with the sun already above the peaks, I finally felt that story land like a stone in still water. For years, I'd treated the sunrise like a fragile thing I was personally responsible for. If I missed one, it felt like the universe would misfire, like a bell that never quite rang true again. But here, the light was soft on my cheeks, bright on the snow, indifferent to my small disaster. The sun had risen just fine without me, and that terrified me more than if it had failed. Because if the sun didn't depend on my discipline, then who was I without my perfect record? Without being the one who always arrived first, who never slipped, who never stumbled. Around me, the other monks began to move, the terrace slowly emptying as they flowed back toward their morning duties. I stayed seated a little longer, my legs tingling with cold and pins and needles, my breath finally starting to deepen. The mountain air slid into my lungs, crisp and thin. My heartbeat, once wild, now matched the slow rhythm of the distant bell. I was still here. The world had not cracked. The light was not angry. It simply poured over stone and wood and skin and breath, exactly as it had yesterday, exactly as it would tomorrow. And beneath my panic, something quieter began to stir. A small question, fragile but persistent. If the sunrise doesn't need me, then maybe it's me who needs to learn how to rise. I shifted my weight, letting my hands rest more softly on my knees. For the first time that morning, I let my eyes fully open to the view without flinching away in shame. Far below, in the valley, someone's roof glinted as if blinking. A bird crossed the sky in a slow, easy arc, unhurried by my inner turmoil. I drew in one long, careful breath. The next sunrise would come whether I caught it or not. Maybe missing this one wasn't the end of anything. Maybe it was the beginning. I didn't know it yet, but that single, humiliating morning, the one where I woke too late, stumbled outside, and watched a sun that no longer needed my witness, was the moment my real practice began. It started with a missed sunrise and a tiny crack in the person I thought I was. The days after the missed sunrise felt strangely stretched, as if time itself had slowed to watch me more closely. I expected consequences, a quiet rebuke, a task reassigned, some subtle sign that I had slipped down an invisible ladder. But the monastery remained unchanged. The bells rang as they always had. The tea steamed in the same chipped cups. The stone paths waited patiently beneath my feet. Only I was different. I woke the next morning long before the night bell, heart already alert, body tense. For a moment, panic rose again. What if I miss it twice? But then something unfamiliar followed. Hesitation. I lay there, listening. The wind had softened overnight. Somewhere in the darkness, bamboo tapped gently against itself. My breath rose and fell, slow but uneven, like a boat adjusting to unfamiliar water. I realized I was no longer eager to rush outside. The hunger to prove myself had dulled, replaced by a quiet uncertainty. When the bell finally sounded, its low voice rolling through the wooden halls, I rose and dressed without hurry. My feet found the cold floor. The door slid open. The corridor welcomed me without judgment. This time I reached the eastern terrace before the sky began to change. The horizon still held the deep, layered blues of night. Stars lingered faintly, reluctant to leave. I stood alone for a while, hands tucked into my sleeves, breath visible in the cold air. And yet, something was missing. Not the sunrise, not the ritual, the feeling. I watched carefully as the first thin line of light appeared, delicate as a brushstroke. Normally, this moment would tighten something in my chest with quiet triumph. Here it is. You made it. But that familiar satisfaction didn't come. Instead, my mind wandered back to yesterday, to the light that had arrived without me. The sun rose anyway. The thought echoed, not accusatory now, but curious. Behind me, soft footsteps approached. Master Wren joined me without sound, standing just far enough away that I could feel his presence without feeling watched. We stood together, facing the horizon, neither of us speaking. After a long while, he said, almost casually, "Did you enjoy today's sunrise?" The question caught me off guard. I searched myself for an honest answer. "I watched it," I said at last. He smiled faintly, eyes still on the sky. "Watching and enjoying our cousins, but they're not twins." I swallowed. "Yesterday I didn't see it at all." "Yes," he said simply. Silence stretched between us, wide and unforced. Finally he asked, "Which sunrise stayed with you longer?" The words landed softly, but they sank deep. I didn't answer right away. My mind replayed the two mornings side by side, the calm panic of yesterday, the glowing light I arrived late to, the shame and fear tangled together, and this morning's perfect attendance. My body present, but my heart oddly distant. "I don't know," I said truthfully. He nodded, as if that was the only answer worth hearing. "Long ago," he said, "a monk complained to his teacher that his shadow followed him everywhere. No matter where he walked, it stretched beside him, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. He ran to escape it. He hid in caves. He cursed the sun for casting it. Exhausted, he collapsed beneath a tree. Only then did the shadow disappear." I frowned slightly. "Because the sun moved?" "Because he stopped running," Master Wren replied. The sky before us continued its slow brightening. The sun lifted, steady and unhurried, indifferent to our small conversation. "You have been running toward the sunrise for many years," he said gently. "Tell me, what were you trying to outrun?" The question unsettled me more than the mist dawn ever had. "I thought discipline was the path," I said, "showing up, never failing." "Discipline is a path," he agreed, "but not the destination." He turned then, facing me fully. His eyes were clear, like still water that reflected whatever stood before it, without clinging. "Another story," he said. "A man polished a mirror every day until his arms ached. He believed enlightenment would appear once the surface was perfect. An old woman passed him each morning and asked, 'What are you doing?' 'Making a mirror shine,' he said. One day she placed a tile beside him and began polishing it. 'What are you doing?' the man asked. 'Making a mirror,' she replied. He laughed. 'You can't make a mirror from a tile.' She smiled. then how will polishing make you what you already are? I felt something loosen in my chest, subtle but unmistakable. For years I had been polishing my mornings, my posture, my attendance, believing that if I perfected the ritual, peace would finally appear, reflected back at me like a reward. But yesterday, peace had arrived in an unexpected form: embarrassment, humility, the quiet realization that the world did not revolve around my effort. Master Ren bowed slightly and turned to leave, his robes whispering against the stone. "Tomorrow," he said over his shoulder, "don't chase the sunrise. Let it find you." That day, the monastery seemed different. Or perhaps I was finally seeing it without the lens of performance. I swept the courtyard slowly, noticing how dust gathered again the moment I cleared it. I carried water from the well, feeling its weight shift with each step. During meditation, my thoughts wandered freely, but for the first time, I did not scold them back into line. I watched them rise and fall like birds passing through an open sky. That evening, as the light faded, I sat alone near the bell tower, the sky dimmed to violet. Crickets began their quiet chorus. The bell rope hung motionless, thick and worn, its fibers smoothed by countless hands. A memory surfaced, another teaching I had once dismissed as too simple. A monk asked his teacher, "What happens after enlightenment?" The teacher replied, "Chop wood, carry water. No fireworks, no sunrise applause, just life, unadorned." When night came, I lay on my mat without setting any inner alarms. I let my breath deepen naturally. Sleep approached slowly, respectfully, like a guest who knocks instead of barging in. As my eyes closed, a thought drifted through me, calm and unafraid. Whether I wake early or late, the sun will rise. And for the first time in a long while, that truth did not feel like a threat. It felt like permission. That night, sleep carried me deeper than it had in years. Not the heavy collapse of exhaustion, but a slow descent, like walking down a familiar path in fog, trusting that the ground would appear beneath each step. I dreamed without images, without stories, only sensations, warmth, breath, the subtle awareness of being held by something larger than my own effort. When I woke, the room was still dark. For a moment, my old reflex flared. Check the light, check the time, hurry. But it dissolved almost as soon as it appeared. I lay still, listening to the quiet pulse of the monastery. Somewhere, a beam creaked as the building shifted in the cold. My breath moved gently in and out. No longer an anchor I forced myself to grip, but a tide that came and went on its own. I did not rush. Eventually, the bell sounded, low, patient, unconcerned with whether I had already been awake or not. I rose, dressed, and stepped into the corridor with the same calm I might have carried into a field or a forest. My feet touched the floor softly. Each step felt complete, not a means to an end. Outside, the sky was still undecided, no clear edge between night and morning. I reached the terrace and stopped short of my usual place. Instead of facing east immediately, I turned and looked back at the monastery behind me. In all my years there, I realized I had rarely done that. The building rested against the mountain like something grown rather than built. Wooden beams darkened by time. Stone steps worn into shallow curves by generations of feet. Small windows glowing faintly, each holding a monk at his own edge of waking. No one was performing, no one was late, no one was early. We were simply here. As the light began to gather, I noticed a novice standing several paces away. He was young, new to the mountain, his head freshly shaved, his posture tense with effort. His eyes were fixed on the horizon with almost painful intensity, as if he were afraid the sun might escape if he blinked. I recognized that posture. He glanced at me briefly, then quickly looked away, embarrassed at being seen. I offered him a small nod, nothing more. His shoulders loosened just a fraction. The sun rose. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It never did, though my mind used to insist otherwise. Light simply accumulated quietly until darkness had nowhere left to stand. I felt no triumph, no disappointment, only warmth. Later that morning, after chores and a simple meal, Master Wren called me to walk with him along the western path. This trail wound away from the main grounds, hugging the curve of the mountain, narrow in places, opening suddenly to wide views in others. It was a path we rarely took, no particular destination, no scheduled purpose. We walked in silence for a long time. The sound of our steps mingled with wind brushing through pine needles. Far below, water moved through the valley, unseen but unmistakable. The smell of earth, cold stone, and old leaves filled the air. Finally, Master Wren spoke. "Do you know why so many monks love the sunrise?" he asked. "Because it's beautiful," I said. He smiled. "Yes, and because it gives the mind something to hold, a clear moment, a beginning and an end." We stopped where the path widened, opening to a view of rolling ridges layered into the distance. "The mind loves edges," he continued. "Dawn, dusk, birth, death, bells, silence. They feel solid, reliable. If I stand here at the right time, I get the right experience." I nodded slowly. "But what happens," he asked, "when the edge moves?" I remembered the panic of that morning, the way the light had already arrived, the way my carefully constructed certainty had collapsed. "I suppose the mind panics," I said. "Yes." He picked up a small stone from the ground and turned it in his fingers. "There is a Zen story about a man who waited every day for a bell to mark the hour of prayer. One morning, the bell rope snapped. No sound came. The man stood frozen, unsure whether to pray, unsure whether time itself had broken. Another monk passed him and said, 'The hour did not disappear. Only your signal did.' He dropped the stone back onto the path. 'For years,' he said gently, 'your sunrise was a bell.' The words settled into me, heavy and precise. We resumed walking. 'Another story,' he said after a while. 'A woman went to a teacher and said, "My meditation is terrible. My legs ache, my thoughts race. I feel like I'm failing." The teacher said, "It will pass." The next week she returned smiling. "My meditation is wonderful," she said. "Peaceful, clear, effortless." The teacher said again, "It will pass." I exhaled, a quiet laugh escaping before I could stop it. Master Wren glanced at me. "Why do you think he answered the same way?" "Because neither state was permanent," I said. "Yes," he replied, "and because clinging to either creates suffering." The path curved downward slightly, the mountain opening to a small clearing where wild grass bent in the breeze. We stopped there, letting the sun warm our backs. "You didn't just miss a sunrise," he said. "You missed an idea of yourself." That landed deeper than anything he had said so far. For years, I had been the monk who never missed dawn. It was a quiet badge I wore, even if I pretended not to. And when that badge cracked, fear rushed in to fill the space. "What remains?" he asked softly, "when the badge falls away?" I didn't answer immediately. We stood there, breathing, listening to the world move without us. Finally, I said, "This." He nodded. "Exactly." That afternoon, I noticed changes I hadn't planned. During meditation, I no longer measured the session by how still I was. When thoughts arose, I let them pass like clouds, some thin, some heavy, none of them needing to be chased away. When my legs ached, I noticed the ache without adding a story to it. When a bell rang, I listened fully. When it stopped, I did not rush to fill the silence. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. I began to miss the sunrise more often, not by sleeping in, but by being elsewhere, in the kitchen, helping prepare rice, on the path, carrying water, sitting quietly while dawn happened, without ceremony. At first, the old anxiety twitched faintly, you should be there, but it faded faster each time. One morning, while washing bowls, I realized the light had already filled the room. Steam rose softly from the water. My hands moved in slow, steady circles. The sun, unseen, warmed my shoulders through the open door. I felt an ease so gentle it almost escaped notice. Later, the novice from the terrace approached me. "I overslept yesterday," he said, eyes downcast. I thought I had ruined something. I looked at him, really looked, at the fear, the same fear I knew so well. "What happened?" I asked. "The sun still rose," he said quietly. I smiled. "Yes, it has a habit of doing that." He hesitated. "Is that okay?" I thought of the sea that came in without the man, the bell that broke, the mirror that was already clear. "It is more than okay," I said. "It's a relief." That night, as darkness settled over the mountain, I lay down without expectation. The day replayed itself not as a list of successes or failures, but as a gentle sequence of moments, each complete, each unremarkable, each enough. Sleep came easily. And somewhere beyond my walls, beyond my concern, beyond my control, the sun prepared to rise again, whether I was watching or not. On the 7th morning after the mist sunrise, I didn't wake at all. At least, not in the way I used to understand waking. There was no sharp edge between sleep and awareness, no sudden command from the mind to begin. Consciousness simply thinned, like mist lifting from a field, until I realized I was breathing, and that breathing was happening without instruction. The room was gray, not night, not day. That quiet middle place I once chased so fiercely. I lay there for a long time, not resisting the urge to rise, not obeying it either. My body felt heavy, but not dull, more like a stone warmed by yesterday's sun, resting, complete in its stillness. Outside, the mountain held its breath. No bell yet, no footsteps, no sound except the faint ticking of cooling wood. A thought floated through me, soft as a leaf touching water. What if I stay? Not out of laziness, not rebellion, just curiosity. I stayed. Eventually the bell rang. Its low voice moved through the monastery like a tide touching familiar shores. Normally that sound would pull me upright before the vibration faded. This time, it passed through me without hooking anything. I smiled faintly in the dimness. When I finally rose, it wasn't because the bell had commanded me, but because the body felt ready. I dressed slowly, feeling the texture of cloth against skin, the gentle stretch of muscle and bone. Each movement felt deliberate, but unforced, like a gesture chosen rather than demanded. Outside, the world had already shifted into morning. The sun was higher than usual by the time I reached the courtyard. Light rested on stone and wood without ceremony. A few monks moved quietly about their tasks, faces calm. Attention settled in their hands rather than the sky. No one noticed my timing. That too felt new. I took the western path again, alone this time. The air was crisp, but kinder than before. Frost clung to shaded ground, while sunlit patches steamed faintly, the mountain exhaling as it warmed. Halfway along the trail, I saw Master Wren kneeling beside the path, examining a fallen branch. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable, but not surprised. "You're late," he said. I felt the old reflex twitch, defend, explain, but it dissolved before reaching my mouth. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "And how is the world?" I glanced around. The trees stood. The path curved onward. Birds hopped between branches, unconcerned. "Still here," I replied. "Good," he said. "Then all is well." We walked together for a short while, not far. He stopped near a stone marker, one I'd passed hundreds of times without noticing. Its surface was smooth from years of rain and touch. A single character was carved into it, worn but legible. I had never asked what it meant. "Do you know why this stone is here?" he asked. "To mark the path?" I guessed. He shook his head gently. "It was placed here because someone once got lost." I frowned. "But the path is clear now," he said. "It wasn't always." He rested his hand on the stone. "A traveler once came through these mountains in thick fog. He walked for hours, convinced he was moving forward, only to discover he had been circling the same slope again and again. When the fog lifted, he wept, not because he had been lost, but because he realized how desperately he had been trying not to be." I listened, something tightening in my throat. When he finally stopped forcing the path, Wren continued, "The mountain revealed it." He stepped back and gestured ahead. "Where do you think you are now?" I considered the question carefully. "Not where I thought I should be," I said. Wren smiled. "Excellent." That afternoon, I sat in the meditation hall longer than usual, not because I was disciplined, but because I forgot to leave. Sunlight moved across the floor in slow bands. Dust drifted lazily, illuminated for a moment, before disappearing again. Thoughts came and went. Memories, regrets, small plans, old fears. None of them stuck. There was a softness in my chest I had never felt before. A sense that I was no longer negotiating with life, no longer trying to bargain for peace by offering perfect attendance or flawless effort. I was simply present. That evening, as dusk settled, the novice found me again. "I missed another sunrise," he said, half smiling now. "And?" I asked. "I watched the light on my hands instead." I nodded. "What did you learn?" He thought for a moment. That it was enough. Later, alone in my cell, I lay listening to the mountain breathe. The wind whispered along the eaves. Somewhere far off, water moved over stone, patient and unstoppable. A final parable surfaced, one Master Wren had never spoken aloud, but which now seemed written into everything around me. A man spends his life waiting for the perfect moment to begin living. One day, he realizes he has been alive the whole time. As sleep began to claim me, my breath slowing, thoughts dissolving like ink in water, I felt no need to prepare for the next morning the sun would rise. Or it wouldn't matter. Either way, the light was already here. In the days that followed, something subtle unfolded, so quiet that I might have missed it if I were still measuring my life by bells and horizons. I stopped asking when things should happen. Morning arrived without announcement. Sometimes I was already awake, listening to the mountain breathe. Sometimes I surfaced from sleep slowly, like a leaf lifting from water. The difference no longer mattered. The light found its way in regardless, touching the walls, warming the floorboards, resting briefly on my hands as if to say hello before moving on. One afternoon, Master Wren asked me to help him carry water from the lower spring. It was a simple task, one I'd done countless times, but that day the buckets felt heavier, not in weight, but in meaning. Each step required attention. Each breath arrived as an ally. Halfway down the path, I stumbled. The water sloshed dangerously close to the rim. For a split second, irritation flared. Careless. You weren't focused. The old voice, sharp and familiar. Then it softened. I laughed, quietly, genuinely, as a few drops spilled onto the stones. Master Wren stopped walking. "You spilled the water," he observed. "Yes," I said. "And the spring?" he asked. I looked back at the source, still bubbling, still generous. "Still full," I replied. He nodded. "Then, nothing has been lost." We resumed our walk. Later, resting near the spring, he told me a story I had never heard before. "There was a monk who carried a cup everywhere," he said. "He filled it carefully each morning and guarded it fiercely all day. One afternoon, another monk bumped into him, and the cup shattered. The monk wept. 'All my effort,' he cried, 'gone in a moment.' The other monk asked, 'Why did you carry a cup made of glass?' The monk replied, 'Because I liked how it looked when it was whole.'" Wren paused, letting the water's sound fill the space. "The next day," he continued, "the monk carried no cup. He drank when water was offered. He thirsted when it wasn't. And for the first time, he noticed how sweet the spring truly was. That evening, I thought about all the cups I'd been carrying without realizing it. The image of myself as disciplined, the comfort of routine, the quiet pride of consistency. They had shattered, not violently, but cleanly, and nothing essential had been lost. As the season shifted, mornings grew softer, the sky lingered longer in pale colors, the air carried a hint of warmth beneath the cold. I found myself lingering more often in places I used to rush through, doorways, paths, moments between tasks. Once, I sat beneath a pine while the sun climbed unnoticed behind me. Needles fell silently around my shoulders. Sap scented the air. Time stretched, not long, not short, just wide enough to rest in. I realized then that I was no longer missing the sunrise. I was missing the idea that I needed to catch it. One night, as the monastery settled into sleep, I dreamed again, not of images, but of motion. A river moving without urgency, a bell ringing without sound, a sky brightening without witness. When I woke, I felt no need to interpret the dream. Some understandings do not need words. In the quiet before dawn, I lay still, breathing, feeling the steady presence beneath all change. The mountain held me. The world turned. Somewhere beyond thought, light gathered patiently. Whether I rose or rested no longer mattered. The sun would rise. And I, finally, was not late. By then, the habit of watching the clock of the sky had loosened its grip on me completely. Days flowed into one another without sharp borders. Morning no longer felt like a gate I had to pass through correctly. It was simply a gentle unfolding, the way a flower opens, without checking whether anyone is watching. One evening, Master Wren asked me to ring the bell. It was an ordinary request. The rope hung thick and familiar in the tower, its fibers darkened by the hands of countless monks before me. I had rung that bell many times, always careful to pull with the right strength, always listening for the perfect tone. Too soft, and it felt timid. Too hard, and it sounded aggressive. I used to believe the bell revealed my inner state to everyone who heard it. I climbed the narrow steps as twilight settled, the sky dissolving into layered shades of gray and violet. When I reached the tower, I paused, hands resting lightly on the rope. Below, the monastery waited. For the first time, I felt no pressure to perform. I pulled. The bell spoke, deep, round, unhurried. Its sound rolled outward, touching stone, wood, air, skin. Then it faded naturally, without clinging to its echo. I didn't judge it. As I descended, Master Ren stood at the base of the steps. "How was it?" he asked. "I rang the bell," I said. He smiled. "Yes." Nothing more needed to be said. That night, lying in my cell, I noticed how easily sleep came now. Thoughts still appeared, but they no longer demanded attention. They passed like clouds reflected on water, visible but untouched. A memory rose of another Zen teaching I had once struggled to understand. A student asked, "How long does it take to become free?" The teacher replied, "As long as you insist on arriving." At the time, those words had frustrated me. Now they felt obvious. Near dawn, I woke briefly, not because of urgency, but because the body shifted naturally. Pale light seeped through the paper window. I did not rise immediately. I did not resist either. I watched the light change. It softened the edges of the room. It rested on the floor, then climbed the wall. Dust danced lazily in the air, turning and disappearing. Somewhere outside, a bird tested its voice, then fell silent again. I realized something then that surprised me with its simplicity. I had stopped waiting. There was no sense of, almost no quiet anxiety about what might be missed. The moment did not feel like a threshold. It felt complete. Later that day, while sweeping fallen leaves from the courtyard, the novice approached once more. He no longer looked anxious. His movements had slowed, not from exhaustion, but from ease. "I stayed in bed this morning," he said, not defensively, just stating a fact. "And how was it?" I asked. "Peaceful," he replied. "I listened to the light arrive." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. As seasons continued their slow turning, I noticed how little effort was required to remain present once the struggle to control had faded. Even discomfort became softer when I stopped pushing it away. Cold was just cold. Heat was just heat. Sound was just sound. Life no longer felt like a test. One afternoon, Master Ren and I stood together watching clouds gather along the ridge. Shadows moved across the valley floor like slow thoughts passing through a quiet mind. "You missed a sunrise," he said suddenly. "Yes," I replied. He looked at me sideways. "And what did you find?" I searched myself for a poetic answer, then let it go. "Nothing," I said. His eyes crinkled with delight. "Exactly." That night, as darkness wrapped the monastery and the mountain settled into stillness, I lay breathing gently, each inhale and exhale dissolving into the next. No expectations, no countdowns, no need to arrive anywhere else. Somewhere beyond my walls, the earth continued its patient turning. Light gathered quietly, as it always does, and whether I witnessed it or not, the sunrise kept its promise, teaching me at last that I had never truly missed it at all. After that, the mornings became almost invisible, not because they were dull or empty, but because they no longer demanded attention. Like breathing, like the steady pulse beneath the wrist, they happened whether I noticed them or not. And strangely, because I stopped chasing them, I felt them more deeply. One dawn, I woke before the bell without knowing why. There was no urgency, no sharp awareness. My eyes simply opened, and the room held me in a soft gray embrace. I lay still, listening. Somewhere in the distance, wind moved through trees. Somewhere closer, the wooden beams of the monastery clicked gently as they adjusted to the cold. I did not rise. Instead, I placed one hand on my chest and felt the slow, patient rhythm there. A realization drifted through me, as calm as the breath itself. This, too, was a kind of sunrise, not in the sky, but in awareness. When the bell finally sounded, it felt less like a command and more like a companion, walking beside me rather than pulling me forward. I rose, washed my face with cool water, and stepped outside. The sky was already bright, clouds drifting lazily across pale blue. Sunlight spilled across the courtyard stones in wide, unhurried shapes. No disappointment, no triumph, just light. That afternoon, Master Ren invited me to join him for tea in the small room near the back garden. It was a place rarely used, quiet even by monastery standards. A single window looked out onto a moss-covered wall where lichen traced pale patterns like forgotten calligraphy. As he poured the tea, his movements were slow and precise, but without stiffness. Steam rose, carrying a faint, earthy scent. "Do you know why tea is taught in silence?" he asked. "So we can taste it fully?" I offered. "Yes," he said, smiling, "and so we don't miss the warmth while searching for the flavor." He handed me the cup. The ceramic was warm against my palms, grounding. "There is an old Zen saying," he continued, "when you are hungry, eat. When you are tired, sleep." I nodded. I used to think that was too simple. And now it feels generous. He laughed softly. "Good. Simplicity often waits for us to grow tired of complexity." We drank without speaking. Outside, a leaf detached itself from a branch and drifted down, unnoticed by anyone but the wall that received it. Later, as evening settled, I walked alone along the eastern terrace, the place that had once felt so sacred, so heavy with expectation. The stones were cool beneath my feet. The railing held the faint warmth of the day. I realized something else then. I hadn't been honoring the sunrise. I had been using it to measure my worth, using it to reassure myself that I was doing life correctly, using it as proof that I was disciplined, devoted, awake. The sunrise had never asked for that. A final parable surfaced in my mind. One Master Ren had once spoken so quietly, I barely heard it at the time. A monk asked, "How do I honor the truth?" The teacher replied, "Stop standing in its way." As darkness deepened, stars appeared one by one, not rushing, not performing. I breathed them in like distant friends. That night, sleep arrived before I noticed it coming. And somewhere in that gentle dissolving, the last tight knot inside me finally loosened, the one that believed meaning had to be earned through perfect timing. Morning would come, or it wouldn't matter. Either way, I was no longer waiting to live. Near the end of winter, snow returned to the mountain, not in a dramatic storm, but as a steady, patient fall, flakes drifting downward with no concern for where they landed. The paths softened, the sharp edges of stone blurred, sound itself seemed to slow, wrapped in white. I watched it from the doorway of the hall, hands tucked into my sleeves, breath rising gently in the cold air. Each flake dissolved on my robe, leaving nothing behind. No trace, no mark of arrival. Once, I would have hurried outside, afraid to miss the way snow changed the light at dawn. I would have stood rigid, cataloging the moment, storing it away as proof that I had been present. Now, I simply stood, Master Ren joined me quietly, as he often did, his steps barely audible against the softened ground. "Snow is an honest teacher," he said. "How so?" I asked. "It falls whether you watch or not, and it melts whether you approve or not." We stood together as the world became simpler. Later that morning, a young monk slipped on the path near the well. He laughed as he fell, the sound bright and unguarded, then stood and brushed snow from his robes. No embarrassment, no story attached. I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the weather. Another parable came to mind, one I had once written carefully into my journal but never lived. A monk asked, "What is the way?" The teacher replied, "Ordinary mind." The monk said, "How do I follow it?" The teacher answered, "If you try to follow it, you lose it." Snow continued to fall. That afternoon, the monastery moved at half its usual pace. Chores took longer. Steps were more careful. Silence grew wide enough to rest inside. I found myself assigned to clear a short section of path. The work was repetitive, almost meditative. Scoop, lift, release. The cleared stones disappeared again within minutes, reclaimed by fresh snow. At first, the futility amused me. Then it softened into something gentler. This, too, was enough. I remembered the man who believed the tide depended on his footsteps, the monk who polished the mirror, the bell that broke, the cup that shattered. All those stories had been circling one truth, waiting patiently for me to stop running from it. Nothing needs my perfection to continue. As evening arrived, snow still falling, the bell rang for rest. Its sound was quieter now, absorbed by the white world, as if even the bell had learned to speak softly. In my cell, I lit a small lamp. Its glow pushed back only a little darkness, just enough to see, not enough to conquer the night. I sat on my mat, hands resting loosely, shoulders relaxed. For the first time in my life, I did not review the day, no list of mistakes, no tally of discipline, no secret pride or hidden regret, just memory dissolving into breath. As I lay down, snow tapping faintly against the window, a final understanding settled, not as a thought, but as a feeling. I had not missed the sunrise. I had missed the struggle, and losing it had given me everything. Sleep came like snowfall, quiet, effortless, and unconcerned with being witnessed. Somewhere beyond the mountain, the earth turned. Light gathered patiently, and in that gentle, unmeasured rhythm, I finally rested. Spring arrived without announcement. One morning, the snow was simply gone, leaving behind damp earth and the soft green insistence of new growth. No ceremony marked the change. No bell rang louder than usual. The mountain just shifted, the way a body shifts in sleep, and suddenly everything was different. I noticed it first in the air. It smelled alive. Not sharp like winter, not heavy like summer, just awake. Breathing felt easier, as if my lungs had been waiting for this permission all along. Birds returned in uneven numbers, some confident, some tentative, testing the silence before filling it. I walked the eastern terrace out of habit, more than intention. The stones were dry now, warmed quickly by the sun. Light spilled across them in wide, generous pools. I didn't look toward the horizon. Instead, I watched a small plant pushing through a crack in the stone near the railing. It leaned slightly, pale green against gray rock, trembling in the breeze. No effort, no planning, no fear of missing anything. Master Ren's voice drifted back to me, remembered rather than heard. When conditions are right, things grow. That morning during meditation, something unusual happened. Nothing, no struggle, no insight, no effort to settle the mind. Thoughts came and went, but they no longer demanded attention. Sensations rose and faded like ripples in water. Even the sense of me softened, loosening at the edges. Time passed, but it didn't feel like passing. Afterward, Master Ren met me in the courtyard. He studied my face with quiet curiosity, as if reading weather. "You look rested," he said. "I think I am," I replied. He nodded. "Then it is nearly time." "For what?" I asked. He smiled but did not answer. Later that day, a message arrived from a neighboring monastery. A young monk there was struggling, restless, rigid, afraid of doing things wrong. Master Ren handed me the letter without comment. I understood. The next morning, before dawn, but without urgency, I prepared to leave. I packed little, a robe, a bowl, a few simple things that did not claim ownership over me. As I stepped onto the path away from the mountain, I paused once, instinctively, and glanced east. The sky was pale, undecided. I felt no pull to stay and no fear of leaving. The sun would rise, and whether I watched it from that terrace or from a distant road no longer mattered. As I walked, the light slowly strengthened behind me, warming my back. I did not turn around. For the first time, I understood another teaching I had once found confusing. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The work had not changed. Only the one doing it had. My steps settled into a steady rhythm. Breath matched movement. The road unfolded without effort beneath my feet. Somewhere ahead, someone would be waiting, anxious, striving, afraid of missing the right moment. I would not tell him to wake earlier. I would not tell him to try harder. I would tell him this: the sun rises even when you are afraid. Peace arrives even when you stop chasing it. And life begins the moment you stop waiting for permission. The mountain faded behind me. Light filled the world. And in that gentle, ordinary morning, nothing was missing at all. The road away from the mountain did not feel like departure. It felt like continuation. Each step carried the same quiet weight as those I once took along the monastery paths. Stone became soil. Pines thinned into open fields. The sky widened. Yet the rhythm remained unchanged. Breath, footfall, breath again, like a sentence that never needed punctuation. By mid-morning, the sun rested comfortably above the hills. Warmth spread across my shoulders, not demanding attention, not asking to be admired. It simply existed. I remembered how many mornings I had strained to see the sun, as if clarity lived only in that first sliver of light. Now it walked with me, patient and forgiving, lighting the dust ahead of my feet. Near a bend in the road, I met an old farmer sitting on a low stone wall. His face was weathered, hands thick with use, eyes alert but calm. He watched me approach without curiosity or suspicion. "You walk lightly," he said as I passed. "So does the road," I replied without thinking. He smiled. "Then you are well matched." We sat together for a while, sharing the quiet. The farmer held a small bowl of rice, eating slowly, each bite deliberate. When he noticed my empty hands, he broke the remaining rice in half and offered it to me. I accepted without hesitation. As we ate, he told me a story, not as a teaching, but as a memory. "When I was young," he said, "I rushed my fields, planted too early, harvested too late. I believed timing was something I had to conquer. One year, I fell ill and could not tend the land at all. My neighbors helped. The crops grew anyway." He chuckled softly. That was the year I stopped arguing with the seasons. I thanked him and continued on. By afternoon, the neighboring monastery appeared, a simple structure resting low against the land, less dramatic than the mountain temple, but no less alive. Bells chimed faintly as I approached, carried on warm air. A young monk met me at the gate. His posture was rigid, eyes sharp with expectation. I recognized the tension immediately. "You're expected," he said. I nodded. "So am I." He looked confused, then stepped aside. Inside, the monastery moved with a different rhythm, less formal, more hurried. Tasks overlapped, voices carried farther. The air felt restless. The monk I had come to see waited in a small courtyard. He was seated stiffly, back straight, hands clenched in his sleeves. When he saw me, relief and anxiety crossed his face at the same time. "I keep missing it," he said without greeting. "Missing what?" I asked, sitting across from him. "The right state, the clear mind, the feeling that I'm doing this correctly." His voice wavered. "Everyone says it comes with discipline, but the harder I try, the further away it feels." I watched a cloud drift slowly overhead, casting brief shade before moving on. "Tell me," I said gently, "what happened this morning?" "I woke late," he said quickly. "The sun was already up. I felt sick with shame." I smiled, not unkindly. "And did the sun rise?" I asked. He frowned. "Of course. Did the world end?" "No." "Did your breath stop?" He shook his head. "Then perhaps," I said softly. Nothing essential was missing. He stared at the ground, fighting something inside. I did not rush him. After a long while, he whispered, "What if I never arrive?" I remembered the bell tower, the broken rope, the snow falling without concern. "Arriving is a story the mind tells itself," I said. "Life happens whether you believe it or not." That evening, we sat quietly as the light faded. No instructions, no corrections, just breath shared in silence. When the bell rang for rest, he startled, then laughed quietly at himself. "I didn't hear it coming," he said. "Neither did I replied. Night settled gently over the monastery. Stars appeared one by one, indifferent to our attention. Somewhere in the dark, a bird called once, then fell silent. As I lay down, sleep approached without effort. No vigilance, no anticipation. The sun would rise again, or it wouldn't matter. And wrapped in that simple truth, the world grew soft enough to disappear. The first night at the lower monastery passed without ceremony. No mountain winds, no dramatic silence. Just the ordinary sounds of a place where people lived rather than withdrew. Footsteps on gravel, a door closing too loudly, someone coughing in their sleep. At first, my body tensed, alert to every disruption. Old habits rose like ghosts, whispering that stillness had been broken, that something sacred was missing. Then I noticed my breath. It had not changed. In the dark, lying on a simple mat, I let the sounds arrive and leave on their own. They passed through awareness the way wind moves through tall grass, touching, bending, never staying. Somewhere between one sound and the next, I fell asleep. Morning came gently, not as a moment to be seized, but as a gradual thinning of darkness. I woke before the bell, not because I intended to, but because the body stirred naturally. Pale light filtered through the small window, softer than on the mountain, less dramatic, yet no less complete. For a while, I stayed where I was. The young monk's words from the day before returned to me. What if I never arrive? The question no longer felt sharp. It felt tired, like a door that had been knocked on too many times. When the bell rang, its sound was uneven, slightly cracked. It didn't command silence. It suggested it. I rose, washed, and joined the others in the courtyard. The monks gathered loosely, some yawning, some smiling faintly, some already lost in thought. No one arranged themselves perfectly. No one corrected anyone else. The sun was already well above the horizon. No one mentioned it. During morning sitting, the young monk sat beside me. His posture wavered, straightening, slumping, straightening again. His jaw tightened, then softened. I felt the effort radiating from him like heat. I did nothing. Afterward, while sweeping fallen leaves near the wall, he finally spoke. "I keep waiting for something to click," he said. "A moment when I know I'm doing this right." I leaned on the broom and considered the question carefully. "Do you hear the bell clearly every time?" I asked. "No," he admitted. "Sometimes it's distant. Sometimes it startles me." "And does the bell worry about that?" I asked. He frowned, then shook his head. "There is a Zen story," I said, "about a man who sat beside a river every day, waiting for the perfect reflection of the moon. If the water was stirred, he grew angry. If clouds passed, he blamed the sky. One night, exhausted, he fell asleep. When he woke, the river was still, the moon bright. Someone asked him if the reflection was perfect. He replied, 'I don't know. I was asleep.'" The young monk paused his sweeping. "Did he miss it?" he asked. "No," I said. "He missed the struggle." That afternoon, I was asked to help in the kitchen. Steam fogged the air. Knives tapped rhythmically against wooden boards. The smell of rice and vegetables filled the room. It was busy, imperfect, alive. At one point, a pot boiled over, spilling water onto the floor. A novice cursed softly, then laughed. Someone grabbed a cloth. The work continued. No one froze. No one apologized to the universe. Watching them, I remembered another parable Master Ren once shared. A monk asked, "How do I keep my practice pure?" The teacher replied, "Don't separate it from your life." As evening approached, the young monk found me again. "I didn't sit very well today," he said. "What happened?" I asked. My thoughts were everywhere. "And where were you?" I asked. He hesitated. "Here." I nodded. "Then you sat perfectly." He laughed, surprised, the sound unguarded. That night, as the monastery settled into rest, I lay listening to the uneven breathing of the place. The bell rang once more, late, soft, almost forgotten. I felt no need to mark it. Somewhere in the dark, a realization settled gently. The space between bells is where life actually happens. Sleep came quietly, without being invited. And beyond the walls, beyond the schedules, beyond every idea of doing things correctly, the world continued, whole, patient, and unconcerned with being missed. The following days at the lower monastery unfolded without clear edges. There was no sharp beginning to morning and no dramatic closing to night. Light entered rooms quietly, touching walls and floors, before anyone thought to name it as day. Darkness returned the same way, slowly, without warning, like a familiar guest who never needed an invitation. At first, I noticed how often the mind still searched for markers. Has the bell rung? Is this late or early? Am I doing enough? Each question arose automatically, like an echo from a habit already losing its strength. And just as automatically, it faded. One morning, while walking the outer path, I saw the young monk sitting alone on a low stone ledge. His robe was folded neatly around him, but his shoulders were slumped, his gaze unfocused. "I think I'm failing," he said as I approached, not looking up. I sat beside him, close enough to share the silence, far enough not to crowd it. Why? I asked. I don't feel different, he said. Everyone says practice changes you. I still get tired. I still get distracted. I still feel unsure. A breeze moved through the grass below us, bending it all in the same direction, then releasing it. Do you feel more unsure than before? I asked. He thought for a moment. No. More distracted? No. More tired? He smiled faintly. Sometimes less. I nodded. Then what exactly is failing? He didn't answer. Instead, he watched an ant carrying something far too large for its body across the stone. It stopped, adjusted its grip, and continued. There is a story, I said quietly, about a man who planted a tree and returned each day to see if it had grown. When it hadn't, he felt disappointed. One night, frustrated, he pulled the tree out of the ground to check its roots. It never grew after that. The young monk's eyes followed the ant until it disappeared into a crack. So, I shouldn't check? He asked. You can check, I said. Just don't pull yourself out of the ground. That afternoon, the monastery buzzed with small imperfections. A bell was rung late. A chant lost its rhythm. A meal was overcooked. Each time, someone shrugged, someone laughed, someone adjusted. No one panicked. Watching this, I realized something subtle. Order had not disappeared. It had softened, like water flowing around stones instead of demanding they move. That evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, I walked alone to the far edge of the grounds. The sky glowed warm and deep, not the sharp fire of dawn, but the mellow gold of day, letting go of itself. I sat on the ground and felt its steady presence beneath me. Another Zen teaching surfaced, one I had once underlined too carefully in a book. Before you understand, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. While you are understanding, mountains are not mountains and rivers are not rivers. After understanding, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. I smiled softly. The sunrise had once been a mountain I believed I had to climb. Then it dissolved into confusion and fear. Now it had returned to being simply the sun rising. Nothing special, nothing missing. When night arrived, I lay down easily. Thoughts drifted through like passing lanterns, lighting the mind briefly before moving on. I didn't follow them. In the darkness, I felt something I hadn't noticed before. Not excitement, not achievement, but trust. Trust that whatever needed to happen would happen without my constant supervision. The bell rang once, then fell silent. I slept, and somewhere beyond effort, beyond discipline, beyond the fear of missing the right moment, life continued exactly as it always had, complete, quiet, and already here. By the second week at the lower monastery, I stopped noticing the days as separate things. They no longer lined up like beads on a string. Instead, they blended one into the next, like water poured into water. Morning dissolved into work, work softened into rest, rest folded quietly into sleep. Nothing announced itself as important, and because of that, everything felt strangely intimate. One afternoon, I was asked to help repair a low stone wall near the edge of the grounds. The work was slow and imprecise. Stones never fit exactly where you want them to. They wobble, they lean, they resist. The young monk worked beside me, his movements careful, his brow furrowed with concentration. Every time a stone shifted, he sighed softly. "It won't sit straight," he muttered. I watched him struggle with a particularly stubborn rock, adjusting it again and again, each attempt tighter than the last. "May I?" I asked. He stepped aside. I placed the stone down gently, without forcing it, and let my hands rest there for a moment. Then I shifted it just slightly, not to make it perfect, but to let it settle where it wanted to be. It held. The monk stared. "You didn't fix it." "No," I said. "I stopped fighting it." He laughed quietly, the sound half relief, half disbelief. We continued working in silence after that, the wall slowly taking shape. Not straight, not elegant, but steady. When we finished, it leaned a little, as if listening to the ground. That evening, Master Ren's words returned to me from long ago. When you stop demanding balance, balance appears. Later, during sitting, discomfort crept into my legs, a familiar ache. Once, I would have tightened against it, counting breaths, forcing stillness. Now, I noticed the ache the way one notices weather, present but not personal. It rose, it lingered, it softened. I did nothing, and nothing needed to be done. After the sitting, the young monk approached me again, his voice quieter than usual. "I think I understand," he said, "but I'm afraid it will disappear." "What?" I asked. "This feeling, this ease." I considered his words carefully. "There is another story," I said. "A man held a bird in his hands and asked a teacher how to keep it forever. The teacher said, 'Open your hands.' The man said, 'Then it will fly away.' The teacher replied, 'Yes, and if you close them, it will die.' The monk looked down at his hands, slowly unclenching his fingers. That night, as darkness settled, the monastery felt especially ordinary. A dog barked in the distance. Someone dropped a bowl. Laughter rose briefly, then faded. I lay on my mat, listening. No part of me reached outward, no part of me pulled inward. I was not waiting for sleep. Sleep arrived anyway. And in that gentle surrender, I understood something I had missed for years. Peace is not an experience you hold on to. It is what remains when you stop gripping. Outside, unseen and unconcerned, the earth turned once more. The sun would rise again, or it wouldn't matter. Either way, nothing essential could be lost. One morning, I realized the day had already been happening for quite some time before I noticed it. There was no clear moment of waking, no internal signal announcing now it begins. Awareness simply surfaced, gently, like a fish rising near the water's skin. My eyes opened. Light was already in the room. The body breathed. The mind was quiet, not empty, just unbothered. For a while I stayed exactly where I was, not because I was tired, not because I was resisting. There was simply no reason to move yet. Eventually, feet touched the floor. Cool wood. Familiar. The corridor welcomed me without echo or expectation. Somewhere, someone laughed softly. Somewhere else, water was being poured. The day was already underway. Outside, the sky held a pale steadiness, neither dramatic nor dull. The sun was present, but unannounced, as if it had slipped into the world without knocking. I remembered how fiercely I once believed that days began at dawn, that missing the sunrise meant missing the start itself. Now, I saw how mistaken that idea had been. Nothing begins where we decide it should. While helping prepare the morning meal, I watched steam rise from a pot and vanish without leaving a trace. A novice beside me stirred absent-mindedly, lost in thought. "I didn't meditate this morning," he said suddenly, as if confessing a crime. I glanced at him. What happened instead? "I was washing bowls," he replied. "Then I forgot about time." I smiled. "That sounds like meditation." He blinked, uncertain, but I wasn't sitting. Neither is the mountain, I said, and yet it's very still. He considered this quietly and returned to his work, shoulders easing. Later, Master Wren and I walked a short distance beyond the grounds. Wildflowers had begun to scatter themselves across the field, uneven, unplanned, indifferent to symmetry. "Do you know why flowers don't worry about blooming at the right time?" he asked. "Because they don't know they're blooming," I said. He nodded. "Exactly." We stood there, letting the field breathe around us. "There is a Zen story," he continued, "about a man who asked his teacher when enlightenment would come. The teacher pointed to the sky and said, 'When the clouds stop passing.' The man waited his whole life. I felt a quiet warmth in my chest, not amusement, not sadness, recognition. That afternoon, a sudden rain passed through. No warning, no transition, just sky opening, then closing again. The ground drank it in eagerly. Leaves trembled, then rested. No one commented. As evening approached, I sat alone near the outer wall. The air smelled clean, washed. A thin mist hovered briefly above the earth, then disappeared. For the first time, I noticed how rarely I thought about myself now. Not in a dramatic way, not as a loss. More like forgetting the weight of something you didn't realize you'd been carrying. A final teaching surfaced, one that once seemed puzzling, but now felt obvious. When walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. Above all, do not wobble. I breathed in, I breathed out. Night arrived without ceremony. There was no sense of finishing the day, because nothing had begun. Sleep came easily, not as an ending, but as another quiet movement in the same uninterrupted flow. And somewhere beyond thought, beyond timekeeping, beyond every idea of arriving on schedule, life continued, steady, complete, and already awake. By then, practice no longer felt like something I did. It moved quietly beneath everything else, like a current beneath the surface of a river, unseen unless you stopped trying to name it. I still sat, I still walked, I still worked, but none of these actions carried the weight they once did. They were no longer steps toward something else. They were complete as they were. One morning, a visiting teacher arrived from a distant valley. His robe was darker than ours, his voice firm, his presence commanding. The monastery shifted slightly to accommodate him. People stood straighter, movements grew more precise. During the first sitting, he walked slowly behind us, his steps deliberate. When he reached the young monk beside me, he paused. "You," he said quietly, "your posture is too relaxed." The young monk stiffened instantly, shoulders drawing back, spine rigid. I felt the familiar ripple, old tension awakening, the desire to do things right. The teacher moved on. After the sitting, the young monk approached me, troubled. "Was he right?" he asked. "Am I doing this wrong again?" I looked at his face, the openness that had begun to replace anxiety, now clouded by doubt. "Tell me," I asked, "how did you feel before he spoke?" "Calm," he said, "present." "And after?" "Tight, afraid." I nodded. "Then which posture brought you closer?" He didn't answer right away. His shoulders slowly softened on their own. That afternoon, the visiting teacher gave a talk. His words were sharp, well-structured, impressive. He spoke of discipline, lineage, correct effort. Many nodded along. I listened without resistance, without agreement. At one point he said, "True practice must be visible. If no one can see it, it is not strong enough." The words hung in the air. Later, as we walked together briefly along the path, he asked me, How long have you practiced? Most of my life, I said. And what have you attained? He pressed. I considered the question honestly. I no longer know how to answer that, I said. He frowned, as if something had slipped past him. That evening, Master Ren found me sitting alone near the old fig tree. The loudest bell, he said softly, is not always the clearest. I smiled. And the clearest practice leaves no footprints, he replied. I remembered a Zen parable then, one I had never fully understood. A monk polished his shoes every day so the road would know he had walked it. Another monk walked barefoot, leaving no trace at all. Only one reached the village. That night, the visiting teacher rang the bell himself. The sound was powerful, sharp, echoing across the grounds. It demanded attention. When it faded, silence returned gently, unchanged. In my cell, I lay listening to that silence, the deeper one beneath sound. It didn't announce itself. It didn't prove anything. It simply held everything that passed through it. I realized then that the most important changes in me had gone unnoticed by almost everyone, and that felt right. Practice, I saw now, was not something to be displayed. It was something that quietly disappeared into life, like salt dissolving into water, changing the taste without leaving a shape. Sleep came softly, without effort, and somewhere in the unseen rhythm of things, nothing needed to be demonstrated, nothing needed to be achieved. The path continued, invisible, steady, and already beneath my feet. The visiting teacher left the monastery at dawn. There was no farewell ceremony, no final instruction carved into memory. He bowed, accepted tea, and walked down the road as quietly as he had arrived. By mid-morning, the rhythm of the place had already returned to itself, like water smoothing after a stone is lifted away. Yet something lingered, not his words, but the echo they stirred. For years, I had carried an unspoken burden, the need to be someone, a good monk, a disciplined monk, a monk who woke before the sun and stood in the right places at the right times. Even when that striving softened, traces of it remained, hidden in subtle corners of the mind. That morning, while walking alone along the outer path, the weight of it became suddenly clear. I stopped. The road curved gently ahead, indifferent to my pause. The grass moved with the breeze. A bird landed, then took off again. Nothing waited for my identity to be confirmed. I sat down on a flat stone beside the path and let the realization settle. No one was watching. No one was measuring. No one needed me to be anything in particular. At first, this felt unsettling, like stepping into air where I expected ground. Then, slowly, it felt like relief. A Zen story surfaced, one Master Ren had once mentioned almost in passing. A monk asked, "Who am I when no one sees me?" The teacher replied, "Who are you when someone does?" At the time, I had laughed politely. Now, the laughter came from deeper in the body, quiet and warm. Later that day, the young monk found me again, eyes troubled but softer than before. "I think I don't exist properly," he said. I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "When I stop trying," he said, "there's nothing to hold on to, no clear image of who I am." I gestured for him to sit beside me. "There's another story," I said. "A man carried a heavy sack on his back for years, believing it contained his valuables. One day, the sack tore open. Inside was only sand. He wept, not because he lost something, but because he realized how heavy nothing can feel." The young monk listened without interrupting. "What did he do?" he asked. He put the sack down, I said, and walked lighter. That evening during sitting, I felt the strange sensation of being unnecessary. The world did not need my focus to remain intact. My breath did not require supervision. Thoughts rose and fell without consulting me. Instead of fear, there was gentleness. Instead of emptiness, space. I remembered how desperately I once wanted to arrive, to become someone complete, solid, defined. Now I saw how much effort that had required, how much tension hid beneath it. To be nobody, it turned out, was not a loss. It was rest. Night arrived softly. Lamps glowed. Voices faded. Somewhere, someone laughed briefly, then fell silent. In my cell, I lay down without reviewing the day, without searching for progress. The body settled. Breath slowed. A final teaching drifted through awareness, simple and unadorned. When you stop carrying yourself, you discover how far you've already come. Sleep took me without resistance. And in that gentle darkness, free of name and role, I rested, not as a monk, not as a seeker, but as life itself, unburdened and enough. The next morning arrived without urgency, without invitation, without demand. I noticed it not through light, but through sound. Somewhere nearby, a bird tested its voice, stopped, then tried again. Wood creaked softly as the building adjusted to temperature. Breath moved in and out of my chest with the same patience it always had, long before I ever thought to guide it. I lay still, not delaying, not preparing. For the first time, there was no sense that the day was waiting for me to appear. When I finally rose, my body felt ordinary in the best way. No heaviness, no excitement, just readiness, the quiet kind that doesn't announce itself. My feet touched the floor. The corridor received me. I washed my face, the cool water briefly shocking, then gone. Outside, morning was already complete. The sky was pale and wide. Sunlight rested gently on the ground, not dramatic, not shy. Monks moved through the courtyard, each absorbed in simple tasks. No one looked up. No one looked down. Everyone was simply where they were. I joined the work of the day without thinking about it. Sweeping, carrying, pausing, continuing. At some point I realized I had not once thought about practice. That realization surprised me, not because practice was gone, but because nothing felt absent in its place. Later, while sitting beneath the fig tree, Master Ren approached and lowered himself slowly beside me. He said nothing at first. Neither did I. Leaves shifted overhead, letting light fall through in uneven patterns that changed moment by moment. After a long while, he spoke. "There is a day," he said, "when the river no longer asks the shore where to go." I nodded, feeling the truth of it without reaching for meaning. "When that day comes," he continued, "people often feel uneasy. They say, 'If nothing guides me, I will be lost.' But the river has always known where to flow." I thought of my years on the mountain, the discipline, the schedules, the careful devotion to beginnings and endings. All of it had been necessary. All of it had also been temporary. "What happens next?" I asked. Ren smiled faintly. "Nothing special." He stood and walked away, his robes brushing the ground, with a sound like water moving through reeds. That afternoon, something unusual occurred. Nothing. No insight. No challenge. No lesson disguised as inconvenience. The day passed like a long, quiet breath. I ate when food was offered. I rested when the body tired. I listened when someone spoke. I was silent when there was nothing to say. Each action ended exactly where it began, without residue. As evening approached, The young monk found me sitting on the low wall near the path. "I'm scared," he admitted softly. "Of what?" I asked. "That I don't need to struggle anymore," he said. "If I stop pushing, what will carry me?" I looked at the road stretching away from the monastery, curving gently out of sight. "Have you noticed," I said, "that your heart beats even when you forget about it?" He nodded. "That your breath continues while you sleep?" "Yes." "That the sun rises whether you hope for it or fear it?" He smiled faintly. "Yes." "Then perhaps," I said gently, "you are already being carried." He sat quietly after that, watching the light fade without naming it. That night, as darkness settled, I felt an unfamiliar sensation, not emptiness, not fullness, but neutrality. The mind did not lean forward or backward. It rested in the middle, balanced without effort. I lay down and let sleep come when it wished. As consciousness softened, one final understanding moved through me, slow and complete. There will come a moment when life no longer asks for your effort, your identity, your vigilance. It will simply move. And when that moment comes, the greatest kindness is to step aside and let it. Sleep arrived without ceremony. Beyond the walls, beyond the monastery, beyond every idea of progress or arrival, the world turned gently on its own. And for the first time, nothing asked for me at all. The following day unfolded so quietly that it almost escaped memory. Nothing unusual happened, nothing meaningful, at least by the old standards of meaning. There was no question to resolve, no teaching disguised as difficulty, no sharp realization arriving like a bell in the chest. The sky remained clear, the air was warm, but not heavy. Tasks were completed and forgotten almost as soon as they ended. And yet, that day stayed with me longer than most. It began, as all days now did, without announcement. I found myself awake, sitting up, already breathing the morning in. Light pressed gently against the paper window, not insisting on attention. I rose, dressed, stepped outside. The courtyard was nearly empty. One monk crossed it slowly, carrying a basket. Another swept fallen leaves into a pile that would soon scatter again. Somewhere inside the buildings, a pot clinked against stone. No one hurried. I joined the sweeping without thinking about it. The broom moved in steady arcs. Dust lifted, then settled. My body followed the rhythm naturally, shoulders loose, grip light. At some point I realized I had stopped narrating the moment entirely. There was only motion. Later, during sitting, discomfort arrived early. A dull ache in the knees, a stiffness in the back. I noticed the familiar impulse to adjust, to improve the posture, to do something. Then I noticed something else. The ache was not asking to be fixed. It was simply present. I let it be. Minutes passed. The ache softened, then sharpened, then faded again, like a sound moving through distance. I did not congratulate myself. I did not note progress. When the bell rang, it startled me. Not because I was lost, but because I had forgotten time altogether. Afterward, Master Ren passed by me in the corridor. He paused, studying my face the way one studies the surface of water, not to judge, but to notice its movement. "You look bored," he said. I smiled. "Yes." "Good," he replied. "Boredom is often the last guard at the gate." I followed him outside, curious. "For many years," he continued, "you were fed by effort. When effort is no longer needed, the mind feels abandoned. It says, 'What am I for now?'" We walked slowly along the shaded path. "Most people run from that feeling," he said. "They invent new problems, new goals, new identities." "And if they don't?" I asked. "Then life begins to show itself without costume." That afternoon stretched wide. I helped in the kitchen again, cut vegetables, carried water, wiped surfaces already clean. The work felt strangely endless, not exhausting, but repetitive in a way that dissolved urgency. At one point, I paused, knife in hand, and felt a wave of restlessness rise. Is this it? Is this all? The questions appeared fully formed, heavy with old expectation. I did not push them away. I watched them. They lingered for a moment, then loosened, like knots pulled too gently to hold. What remained was not disappointment, but spaciousness. Yes, something in me answered. This is it. Later, sitting alone near the outer wall, I watched shadows drift across the ground. Clouds passed lazily overhead, unconcerned with symbolism. A dog wandered by, sniffed the stones, lay down, slept. I envied nothing. I wanted nothing. A Zen story returned to me then, one Master Ren had once told, near the beginning of my training, back when I was still hungry for meaning. A student asked, "Master, what is enlightenment like?" The master replied, "It is like a long afternoon with nothing to do." The student frowned. "That sounds boring." The master smiled. "Exactly." At the time, I had secretly hoped that was a joke. Now, sitting in the warm stillness of the day, I understood. Enlightenment was not fireworks, not clarity sharp enough to cut, not answers lined neatly in the mind. It was the end of waiting for something else. As evening approached, the light grew softer, rounding the edges of everything it touched. The monastery settled naturally into quieter movements. Voices lowered, steps slowed. I lay down before darkness fully arrived. For a while I did not sleep, not from restlessness, but from contentment, too simple to collapse into dreams right away. Breath moved easily, thoughts drifted without catching, and in that long, quiet pause before sleep, a final truth settled without resistance. Life does not always teach. Sometimes it simply lives. And when nothing asks for meaning, nothing needs to be added. Sleep came gently, like dusk crossing into night, unnoticed, unmarked, and completely enough. The morning came wrapped in an unusual quiet, not the quiet of reverence or anticipation, but the kind that settles when nothing important is expected to happen. I noticed it while washing my face. The water was cool, steady. My reflection looked back without question or demand. No trace of urgency lingered in the eyes. I realized then that I had stopped looking for signs. In the past, even calm days carried a subtle tension. Somewhere beneath the surface, the mind waited for a lesson, an insight, a shift that could be named and carried forward. Now, that habit had weakened. The day did not promise anything, and for the first time, I did not feel cheated by that. Outside, the monastery moved slowly. A monk repaired a loose board near the storage shed, tapping the nail gently until it held. Another hung damp robes in the sun, spacing them without precision, trusting the air to do its work. A kettle steamed quietly near the kitchen door, forgotten for a moment, then remembered. No one spoke about practice. No one spoke about progress. I joined the work wherever my hands were needed, without choosing. When one task ended, another appeared naturally. When nothing appeared, I sat. At some point, while sitting near the fig tree, I became aware of a faint discomfort in the chest, not pain, not anxiety, but a soft restlessness that asked, shouldn't something be happening? I did not reject the feeling. I let it sit beside me, the way one allows a tired traveler to rest without interrogation. It stayed for a while. Then it faded, unnoticed, leaving no explanation behind. Master Ren passed by and paused briefly. "You look lost," he said. I smiled. "Yes." "And how does that feel?" he asked. "Light," I replied, surprised by the truth of it. He nodded. "Being lost is frightening only when you believe there is a correct destination." He walked on, leaving the words where they fell. Later, the young monk joined me. He seemed quieter than usual, not troubled, just thoughtful. "I waited all morning for something to happen," he admitted. "It didn't." "And?" I asked. "At first, I was disappointed," he said. "Then, I forgot to be." We sat together in silence after that, watching leaves shift in the breeze. The sun moved slowly across the ground, creating patterns that lasted just long enough to be noticed, then disappeared. I remembered another Zen story, one rarely spoken because it sounds too ordinary to be wise. A monk asked, "What should I do on days when nothing is revealed?" The teacher replied, "Wash your bowl." The monk said, "And then?" The teacher replied, "If it is still dirty, wash it again." That afternoon, I washed bowls. I washed them carefully, not with ceremony, but with attention. Each bowl felt slightly different in the hands. One was chipped, one was warm from recent use, one held a faint scent of tea. When I finished, the bowls were clean. Nothing else happened. As evening approached, clouds gathered briefly, then moved on without rain. The light dimmed. Insects began their quiet evening chorus. The monastery settled into itself the way a body settles into sleep before actually sleeping. Lying on my mat that night, I noticed how rarely I thought about who I was becoming. That question had once driven every effort. Now it seemed distant, almost irrelevant. The body was tired, the breath was slow. That was enough information. A final reflection drifted through awareness, gentle and complete. Not every day is a door. Not every moment hides a message. Some days exist only to be lived. And when a day refuses to teach, it offers something rarer, rest without explanation. Sleep arrived without invitation. Beyond walls and names and long-faded ambitions, the world turned quietly, asking nothing, withholding nothing. And held within that simple turning, I rested, whole, unnamed, and finally finished searching. The morning after the day that refused to teach arrived without softness, not harshly, just plainly. The air was cooler, the sky a clean, indifferent blue. No mist clung to the ground. No birds announced anything important. It felt like a morning that had no interest in being noticed. I welcomed that. I rose, dressed, and stepped outside. The monastery was already awake in its quiet way. Someone had left a door half open. Someone else had forgotten a broom leaning against the wall. Signs of living, not of order. As I walked the outer path, I noticed how rarely I wondered what came next. That surprised me. For most of my life, even in stillness, there had been an undercurrent of anticipation, a sense that the next realization, the next shift, the next clearing of the mind was just beyond the bend. Now the bend arrived, and nothing waited there. Only more road. I followed it anyway. The path dipped slightly and narrowed between two stands of trees. Their branches reached toward one another overhead, not touching, leaving a thin strip of sky like a forgotten thought. Light passed through it without ceremony. Halfway through the grove, I stopped. Not because I was tired, not because something called me. The body simply paused. Standing there, I felt an unfamiliar sensation, being exactly where I was without leaning forward or backward. The mind did not ask why. It did not ask what for. It rested alert, but uncurious. A memory surfaced, quiet and distant. Years ago, a monk had asked Master Ren, "How do I know if I am on the right path?" Ren had answered, "When the path no longer argues with you." At the time, I had written the words down, underlined them twice, and tried to make sense of them. Now, standing in the narrow grove with nothing special happening, the meaning felt obvious. The path wasn't agreeing with me. It had stopped speaking altogether. Later that day, the young monk approached me with an unsettled expression. "I feel strange," he said. "How so?" I asked. "It's like I don't know what to improve anymore," he said. "There's no clear problem to solve." I nodded slowly. "And how does that feel?" I asked. He searched himself honestly. Unstable, but also quiet. We sat together on a low stone wall. "There is a Zen story," I said, "about a man who spent his life sharpening a knife. He believed that one more careful stroke would make it perfect. One day, the blade was so thin, it disappeared. The man wept. He thought he had lost it. The teacher said, 'You are no longer carrying a knife. Why are you afraid?' The young monk exhaled, as if something heavy had been set down without his noticing. That afternoon passed slowly. I helped repair a roof tile that didn't really need repair. I carried water that could have been carried later. I listened to a conversation without joining it. Each act rose and fell without leaving a trace behind. At some point, I realized I had stopped remembering the day as it happened. Moments slipped by without attaching themselves to memory. It felt like walking through shallow water, movement without resistance, without accumulation. As evening approached, I sat alone near the edge of the grounds. The sun lowered behind distant hills, but I did not turn to face it. Light moved across the land without needing my attention. Shadows lengthened, then softened. I remembered how desperately I once believed meaning lived in beginnings and endings. Now, neither held me. A final parable drifted up, unannounced, like a leaf carried by water. A monk asked, "What happens after the questions end?" The teacher replied, "You stop interrupting the answer." Night came gently. In my cell, I lay down and felt the simple weight of the body against the mat. Breath slowed. Thoughts thinned. Nothing asked for review. Nothing demanded closure. And in that quiet, unargued space, where the road no longer questioned me, and I no longer questioned it, sleep arrived as naturally as breath, carrying nothing forward, leaving nothing behind. The silence changed its texture that morning. It was not deeper, not heavier, not more sacred. It was simply there. I noticed it while standing near the well, watching the bucket rise slowly from the darkness below. The rope creaked softly, familiar and unremarkable. Water surfaced, clear and steady, reflecting nothing but light. As I lifted it free, I realized I had expected something, some feeling, some confirmation, to arrive with it. Nothing did. And for the first time, that absence felt complete. I carried the water across the courtyard, careful not to spill, though not afraid of spilling either. The body knew what to do. Hands adjusted naturally. Feet found their place. The mind did not supervise. Later, while sitting in the open hall, a question arose. Quiet, but persistent. Is this it? The question no longer carried urgency. It was not sharp. It did not demand resolution. It hovered gently, like a bird, unsure whether to land. I did not chase it away. I let it perch. Minutes passed. Breath moved. Light shifted. The question remained, unchanged, unanswered. Then it left, not because it was answered, but because it no longer needed to be. Master Ren entered the hall and sat nearby. We did not speak. His presence felt no different from the wooden pillars or the open door. He was simply part of the space. After a long while, he said quietly, "Do you hear that?" I listened carefully. Wind brushed the eaves. Someone coughed in the distance. The faint hum of insects moved through the air. "Yes," I said. He nodded. Most people wait their whole lives for silence to say something back to them. I felt a warmth spread through my chest, not joy, not understanding, recognition. "There is a story," he continued, "about a monk who meditated for 30 years, waiting for the universe to reveal its meaning. One day, frustrated, he shouted into the valley, 'Why won't you answer me?' The echo returned his own voice. He laughed, bowed, and left. I smiled softly. Did he receive an answer? I asked. Yes, Ren said. He stopped asking. The day moved on without emphasis. I worked alongside others, sharing the quiet rhythm of ordinary effort. No one spoke of insight. No one asked how long I would stay or where I would go next. At midday, a meal was served late. No explanation was offered. People ate when food arrived, stopped when they were full, returned to their tasks without comment. I noticed how rarely irritation arose now, and how briefly it stayed when it did. In the afternoon, I walked beyond the monastery grounds alone. The land opened wide, unadorned. Fields stretched without pattern. The road dissolved into earth and grass, then reappeared without explanation. I walked until the body suggested stopping. Standing there, surrounded by nothing in particular, I felt a quiet certainty, not as a thought, but as a settling. Nothing was being withheld. Nothing had ever been promised. And yet, nothing was lacking. Another Zen story surfaced, one I had once dismissed as too simple to matter. A monk asked, "What is the ultimate teaching?" The teacher replied, "The sound of rain." "But what does it mean?" the monk pressed. "It means it's raining," said the teacher. As evening came, clouds gathered briefly, then passed. A few drops fell, scattered and soft, darkening the ground in small, irregular shapes. I did not look for patterns. Night arrived soon after. In my cell I lay down and noticed how sleep no longer felt like an escape or a reward. It was simply the body doing what bodies do when the day releases them. As awareness softened, one final understanding rested quietly without needing to be held. Silence does not answer because it never asked. And in that wordless completeness, free of question, free of reply, I slept with nothing left unresolved and nothing waiting on the other side. I woke before the light, but not because the body decided to rise early. It was simply finished, resting. The room was still dark, yet not heavy. Darkness no longer felt like an absence waiting to be corrected. It felt complete, like a bowl already full. I lay there for a while, listening to nothing in particular. No thoughts lined up. No plans assembled themselves. The day had not asked for me yet. When I stepped outside, the air was cool and steady. The sky held that pale, expectant color that once made my chest tighten with urgency. Years ago, this moment would have pulled me forward, whispering that I must be present, must witness, must arrive on time. Now, it passed through me without leaving a mark. I walked slowly along the edge of the grounds. The earth was firm beneath my feet. Somewhere, a bird stirred. Somewhere else, another slept. The monastery behind me breathed quietly, unaware of my movements. The horizon brightened, the sun rose. not as an event, not as a reward, just as a continuation. I watched it without ceremony, then looked away before it finished. There was no need to stay. There was no need to leave. The light did not belong to me, and for the first time, I understood that this was its greatest gift. Later that morning, Master Ren and I shared tea without speaking. Steam curled upward, then disappeared. The cup warmed my hands. When the tea was gone, the cup was simply empty, no commentary required. After a long silence, he said, "You're ready to leave again." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Yes." "Do you know where you're going?" he asked. I smiled. "No." He returned the smile gently. "Good." There was no farewell ritual, no instructions to carry, no reminder of lessons learned. I packed the same few things as before, lighter than ever, and stepped onto the road as the monastery receded behind me. The path did not open dramatically. It did not close either. It simply continued. As I walked, I noticed how the body moved without consulting the mind, how breath arrived without effort, how the world met me without expectation. I did not feel like a traveler on a journey. I felt like movement itself, passing through different shapes. Near midday, I stopped beside a field where grass swayed gently in uneven waves. I sat down and rested my hands on the ground. The warmth of the earth met them without hesitation. A memory surfaced, not as a lesson, but as a quiet echo. A monk asked, "What is freedom?" The teacher replied, "When nothing needs to be different." Sitting there, I finally understood why the sunrise no longer held me. I had once believed that missing it meant missing the beginning. Now, I saw that life has no beginning that can be missed. It is always already underway. As afternoon softened, I continued walking. The road curved, straightened, disappeared briefly into tall grass, then returned. I followed without resistance. There was nowhere else to be. By evening, fatigue settled gently into the body. I lay down beneath an open sky, the first stars appearing one by one, unannounced and unconcerned. Breath slowed, muscles released, thought thinned. There was nothing left to review, no measure of progress, no image of who I had become. No need to remember what I had learned, only the quiet certainty that I had not missed anything. As sleep arrived, it did not feel like an ending. It felt like the same movement the sun makes when it rises, the same movement the earth makes as it turns. Steady, unclaimed, and complete. And somewhere beyond effort, beyond identity, beyond the long habit of waiting for the right moment, life continued to unfold gently, asking nothing, offering everything, and needing no witness at all. The road stretched onward in a way that felt unfamiliar, not because it was difficult, but because it no longer asked anything of me. In the past, every path carried a question. Where does this lead? What will I learn here? Who will I become if I walk far enough? Now, the road lay open like an answer that did not need to be spoken. I walked through the early hours without noticing the transition from night to morning. Darkness thinned, color returned. The sky shifted its weight almost imperceptibly. I did not look up to check. My feet found the ground. My breath stayed with me. That was enough. At one point, I passed a small village just beginning to wake. Smoke rose from a single chimney. A dog trotted across the road carrying something unimportant. A woman opened a wooden door and paused, feeling the air before stepping outside. None of it required my attention. None of it escaped it either. I realized then that attention no longer felt like a beam I aimed. It felt like space, wide, quiet, able to hold whatever appeared without effort. I stopped near a stream and sat on a smooth stone. Water moved past steadily, never hesitating, never speeding up to make a point. I watched leaves drift briefly in its surface, then disappear downstream. A Zen story surfaced naturally, as if the sound of the water had carried it. A monk asked, "How do I carry the world without being crushed?" The teacher replied, "Why are you carrying the world?" I smiled faintly, feeling the truth of it in my shoulders, which had softened without my noticing. For years, I had carried the sky, the weight of meaning, the burden of understanding, the responsibility to arrive somewhere worthy. Sitting by the stream, I felt how unnecessary that had been. The sky rested on nothing. The water flowed without explanation. And I, finally, did the same. As the day warmed, I continued walking. The land changed gradually. Trees gave way to open ground. Hills softened into fields. Each shift happened without announcement, without demanding to be marked. Hunger arrived. I ate when food appeared. Thirst came. I drank. Fatigue followed later, gentle and honest. I rested without guilt. At no point did I feel behind. In the afternoon, I encountered an old man repairing a fence. His hands moved slowly, deliberately, as if time itself had agreed to wait for him. He looked up as I passed. "You're traveling light," he said. "Yes," I replied. He nodded, satisfied, as if that explained everything. We did not speak again. As the sun lowered, shadows lengthened across the road. The light grew warmer, then softer, rounding the edges of the world. I noticed how evening no longer felt like a closing door. It felt like a long exhale. I lay down beneath a tree as night approached. Leaves whispered faintly above me. The earth held my back without comment. Stars appeared slowly, one by one, not rushing to be complete. Breathing deepened, muscles loosened, and there, between wakefulness and sleep, a final understanding settled. Not dramatic, not sharp, but steady. Life does not need to be carried. It carries itself. When you stop holding the sky, your hands are free to feel the ground beneath you. Sleep came gently, like water closing over a stone. And in that quiet dark, free of questions, free of arrival, free of the long habit of effort, I rested, moving nowhere, missing nothing, held entirely by the path itself. That night did not arrive the way nights used to. There was no clear moment when day surrendered its place. No line drawn across the sky. Light did not retreat. It simply thinned, like breath becoming quieter without stopping. I noticed this only after some time had passed, when shadows had already softened and colors had already lost their names. I was walking then, slowly, without destination. The road beneath my feet had narrowed into a path, and the path had begun to forget itself. Grass pressed in from both sides. Stones appeared where road once was. Still, the body moved easily, trusting each step to find its own ground. For years, evenings had always carried a faint pressure, a sense of before it ends, a subtle counting of what had been done and what had not. Even on calm days, that pressure lingered, like a hand resting lightly on the chest. This evening held none of that. It had no edge. I stopped near a gentle slope overlooking a wide stretch of land. The horizon was open, but not dramatic. Fields rolled quietly into one another. A few distant lights appeared, lamps being lit without ceremony. Smoke rose and disappeared. Life continuing, unconcerned. I sat down and let the body rest. There was no thought of sunset, no thought of nightfall. only a gradual softening of everything. As the air cooled, I wrapped my robe more tightly around myself. The movement was simple, unremarkable, yet it carried a strange tenderness. I realized I had begun treating the body differently, less like a tool, less like something to discipline, more like a companion that had walked with me all this way. A memory surfaced then, quiet but clear. Long ago, a monk had asked Master Ren, "How do I know when a day is complete?" Ren had replied, "When you stop adding to it." At the time, I had not understood. Days had always felt incomplete to me, always in need of improvement, reflection, judgment. Now, sitting in a dusk that refused to draw a line, the meaning settled gently. Nothing needed to be added. Breath moved in and out. Crickets began their evening song. Somewhere far off, a single bell rang, not for me, not for this place, just ringing. I did not mark the sound as meaningful. I did not ignore it either. It came and went, like everything else. As darkness deepened, stars appeared slowly, not all at once. Each one arrived without claiming attention. The sky did not announce itself as magnificent. It simply became what it always was when light stepped aside. I lay back on the ground, letting the earth support me fully. The firmness beneath my spine felt reassuring, honest. Above me, the vastness of the sky no longer felt heavy. I was not carrying it. I was not inside it. We were simply sharing space. Another Zen story drifted into awareness, uninvited and perfectly timed. A monk asked, "What is it like to rest in truth?" The teacher replied, "Like lying down without worrying whether the ground will hold you." I smiled softly, feeling the weight of my body sink naturally into the soil. For a long while I stayed there, awake but unoccupied. Thoughts arose occasionally, small, pale things, but they no longer demanded response. They passed the way clouds pass when there is no wind strong enough to shape them. Eventually, fatigue arrived, not as exhaustion, but as invitation. Sleep did not feel like surrender. It felt like continuation. As consciousness thinned, one final understanding settled into place, quiet and undeniable. Not every day ends. Some days simply fade into something softer. And when there is no edge, there is nothing to fall from. Sleep closed around me gently, not as darkness swallowing light, but as silence embracing sound. Beyond thought, beyond memory, beyond the long habit of dividing time into what matters and what does not, life moved on, steady, generous, and complete, without being witnessed. Morning did not come from the east that day, at least, not in the way I was used to noticing. I woke with the light already touching my face, slanting in from somewhere unexpected. For a moment, disorientation flickered. Which way am I facing? Then faded without resolving itself. It didn't matter. The body knew it was morning. Breath had changed its rhythm. The coolness of night had loosened its grip. Somewhere nearby, insects had fallen silent, while birds began their quiet negotiations with the air. I sat up slowly and looked around. I had slept beneath a low stand of trees. Their branches filtered the light into soft, uneven patches that moved gently with the breeze. There was no clear horizon here, no dramatic line to announce the day's arrival. Light arrived from the side, from above, from everywhere at once. It felt fitting. For most of my life, I had expected awakening to come directly, clearly, unmistakably, like the sun lifting itself into view. I had believed that truth would rise straight in front of me, demanding recognition. Instead, it had come like this, quiet, indirect, impossible to point at. I stood, stretched gently, and felt the ground release me without reluctance. There was a stiffness in the legs, an honesty to it. The body spoke plainly now, without drama. I listened and adjusted. As I began walking again, the path was barely visible. Grass pressed close. Stones appeared where they wished. Still, my feet found their way without calculation. I remembered a Zen story I had once heard, but never understood. A student asked, "Why do masters always speak in riddles?" The teacher replied, "Because you're walking sideways." At the time, I had assumed it was a clever joke. Now, walking through a morning that refused to line itself up neatly, the meaning felt simple. Life rarely approaches from where you expect it. When you stop insisting on a straight road, even a sideways arrival makes sense. After some time, the trees thinned and the land opened. I came upon a small clearing where dew clung to every blade of grass, turning the ground into a quiet field of light. Each step disturbed the surface briefly, then the brightness returned. Nothing held a mark. I sat there for a while, watching the dew evaporate slowly, without hurry. It reminded me of effort, the way it leaves without announcing itself once it is no longer needed. Another memory surfaced, unforced. A monk once asked, "How do I know when effort is finished?" The teacher replied, "When it stops leaving footprints." I smiled faintly, lifting my foot and watching the grass rise back into place. By mid-morning, hunger arrived. I ate what I had, not sparing it, not rationing it. When it was gone, it was gone. The body accepted this without complaint. Trust had quietly replaced planning. As the day warmed, clouds gathered unexpectedly, not heavy, not threatening. Light dimmed slightly, then brightened again as they passed. The sky did not commit to any single expression. I appreciated that. Once, inconsistency would have unsettled me. I would have searched for meaning in the shift, asked what it signified. Now, it felt like companionship, weather allowed to be itself. In the afternoon, I met no one, and I noticed, with mild surprise, that I did not miss anyone either. Solitude no longer felt like absence. It felt like space in which nothing needed to perform. When evening approached, it did not announce itself with color or shadow. It simply leaned in, gradually cooling the air, rounding the edges of sound. I lay down early, not because I was tired, but because there was nothing else to do. As sleep approached, I reflected, not deliberately, not analytically, on how far I had come without traveling anywhere at all. The sunrise I had missed so long ago no longer felt like a mistake. It felt like a doorway, not into something new, but out of something unnecessary. As darkness settled, a final thought drifted through awareness, light as dew lifting from grass. Sometimes the truth arrives from the side, quietly, without asking you to turn around. Sleep followed naturally, and in that gentle sideways morning that had already passed into night, nothing needed to be faced directly, nothing needed to be named, and nothing, absolutely nothing, had been missed. I noticed the stillness before I noticed anything else. It wasn't the absence of sound. Birds still called. Wind still moved through grass. Somewhere far off, something struck wood and echoed briefly across the land. Yet, beneath all of it, there was a steadiness that did not shift when the surface changed. The stillness followed me as I walked, not behind, not ahead, around. For many years, I had believed stillness was a place you arrived at if you sat correctly, breathed carefully, and removed every distraction. I had searched for it in temples, halls, and silent rooms, I thought it waited somewhere quiet, somewhere protected. Now, it moved with me. The path widened again as I left the clearing. Soil became firmer. Stones arranged themselves into something resembling a road. I walked without checking my pace. Whether slow or fast no longer felt relevant. The body adjusted naturally, like water finding its level. At one point, I stopped to drink from a stream. The water was cold, startling at first, then deeply satisfying. I cupped it with both hands, letting some spill freely back into the flow. There was no urge to capture it all. Watching the water slip away, a memory surfaced. Another teaching I once struggled with. A monk asked, "Why do we let go of what sustains us?" The teacher replied, "So it can continue to sustain us." I laughed softly, feeling the truth of it in my hands. As the day unfolded, I became aware of something else. I was no longer collecting moments. Once, every quiet experience felt like something to store away, a proof of progress, a sign of depth. I had treated calm like a treasure to be guarded. Now, moments arrived and departed without leaving marks, and I did not chase them. They didn't need to stay. In the early afternoon, clouds gathered again, thicker this time. Light softened. The air cooled. A brief rain passed through, gentle and uncommitted. Drops fell, then stopped, leaving the world smelling clean and slightly unfamiliar. I did not seek shelter. I let the rain touch me, then leave. When it ended, the stillness remained. Later, I rested beneath a tree whose branches curved low enough to hold shade, even after the rain. Water dripped slowly from leaves, each drop falling with its own timing, unconcerned with rhythm. I realized then that stillness did not mean nothing happened. It meant nothing argued with what happened. Another Zen story surfaced, simple and quiet. A student asked, "How do I remain still in a changing world?" The teacher replied, "Do not try to remain." Sitting there, listening to drops fall and disappear into the earth, I understood. Stillness was not something to maintain. It was what appeared when resistance ended. As evening approached, the sky cleared gradually. Light returned briefly, softer than before, touching the edges of clouds from behind. I watched, without interpreting. The body breathed, the heart beat. That was enough. When night came, it did not erase the stillness. It deepened it. I lay down beneath the open sky, the ground cool and reliable beneath me. Stars appeared slowly, without forming patterns I cared to follow. Each one rested exactly where it was. Breath slowed, muscles released. And in that quiet settling, I realized something with gentle certainty. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the absence of resistance. Sleep arrived easily, like a leaf finally trusting the water beneath it. Beyond the road, beyond the sky, beyond every former effort to hold or reach or understand, the stillness remained. Not waiting, not retreating, simply present wherever I was. That night did not feel like a door shutting behind the day. It felt like the day loosening its grip. I noticed this while lying awake beneath the open sky. Darkness had settled fully now, yet it did not press inward. It did not claim territory. It simply rested over everything the way a blanket rests, touching without confining. Stars scattered themselves without pattern. Some were bright and steady. Others flickered, uncertain. I did not follow their shapes. I did not search for meaning among them. They were present, and that was enough. In the past, night had always carried a sense of completion, a subtle accounting of what had been done, what had been missed, what might still be corrected tomorrow. Even peaceful nights held a trace of that habit, like an echo that lingered after sound had faded. This night held none of it. There was nothing to complete. I lay still, listening to the body settle into the earth. The ground felt cool, firm, trustworthy. Muscles released in small waves, one after another, as if each part were being given permission to rest at its own pace. Breath moved slowly, not deep, not shallow, just moving. A Zen story returned to me then, one I had once written in the margin of a book without understanding why it mattered. A monk asked, "What happens after the day ends?" The teacher replied, "Where does it go?" At the time, I had searched for a clever answer. Now, lying in a night that refused to close around me, the question dissolved on its own. The day had not gone anywhere. It had softened into this, into stillness, into rest, into a quieter form of being. Sleep did not come immediately, and for once, I did not reach for it. I rested in the space between waking and sleep, where thoughts grew faint and then disappeared entirely. Sensations remained: the coolness of air on skin, the faint hum of insects, the distant call of something unseen. But they did not pull attention forward or backward. They hovered, then passed. At some point, I noticed a subtle joy, not happiness, not excitement, just a gentle ease that had no object. It surprised me. For years, joy had always arrived attached to something, an insight, a moment of clarity, a sense of achievement. This joy arrived empty-handed. It did not explain itself. It did not ask to be held. It stayed for a while, then softened into neutrality, like a smile fading from a relaxed face. I remembered another teaching, one Master Ren had shared quietly one evening long ago. When joy comes, let it come. When it goes, let it go. Do not ask either one to explain itself. The night deepened. Clouds passed slowly across the sky, briefly hiding the stars, then releasing them again. Darkness adjusted, never settling into a fixed shape. It felt alive, responsive, but not demanding. I realized then that I'd no longer felt the urge to protect quiet. Once, silence felt fragile, easily broken by sound or thought. I guarded it carefully, afraid it might shatter if touched. Now, silence felt vast enough to hold noise without injury. A twig snapped nearby. The sound rose and fell. Silence remained. Eventually, sleep approached, not as a collapse, but as a gradual dimming. Awareness thinned at the edges. Thoughts lost their outlines. The body grew heavier without becoming tense. Before slipping fully into sleep, a final understanding settled, simple and complete. Night does not end the day. It gives it space to rest. And in that space, free of borders, free of endings, free of the long habit of closing and opening, life continued quietly, without interruption, without needing to be named. Sleep came gently, not as disappearance, not as escape, but as the same movement the world makes when it turns, steady, unremarkable, and endlessly enough. When I woke, it was impossible to say how long I had been asleep. The body had rested. That much was clear. Muscles felt loose, breath unhurried. But the usual markers were missing. No sense of early or late. No quiet calculation of how much of the night had passed. Time had slipped away unnoticed, leaving no footprints behind. I sat up slowly, letting awareness return without pulling it forward. The sky was pale, but not bright. Light hovered in that in-between state where night has not fully let go and day has not yet taken responsibility. The air carried a coolness that did not belong to any hour in particular. For the first time, I realized I could not tell whether the sun had risen, and I felt no urge to find out. I stood and stretched gently. The earth received my feet as it always had, without question, without delay. Somewhere nearby, a bird shifted in the grass. Another remained silent. Both felt equally complete. I began walking, not along a clear path, but through open land where direction mattered less than movement. Grass brushed my robe. Stones pressed briefly into the soles of my feet, then released them. Each step arrived exactly when it was needed. As I walked, a thought arose, quiet, curious, unafraid. What if this day never begins? The question did not carry anxiety. It did not seek an answer. It simply hovered, like mist in a field, catching light without becoming solid. I remembered a Zen story that once puzzled me deeply. A monk asked, "What time is it when there is no clock?" The teacher replied, "The same time as always." At last, I understood. This day did not belong to time. Tasks appeared naturally. I stopped to eat when hunger arrived. I rested when fatigue suggested it. I drank when thirst made itself known. Each action completed itself without pushing into the next. There was no sequence to maintain. There was no schedule to respect. At some point, I noticed how unfamiliar this felt. Not confusing, but spacious. Without time pressing forward, moments expanded gently. A single breath seemed wide enough to rest inside. A single sound seemed sufficient. I sat for a long while near a low ridge, watching light shift across the land. Clouds passed, slow and unhurried. Shadows moved without trying to make sense. I did not measure how long I sat. Another memory surfaced, one Master Ren had once shared while we walked together in silence. When you stop asking what comes next, time loosens its grip. I felt that loosening now, not as freedom from time, but as freedom within it. Later, I encountered a narrow stream cutting through the land. I stepped into it carefully, letting the cold water wrap around my ankles. The shock was brief, honest, refreshing. I stood there longer than necessary, feeling the current move around me without resistance. The water did not hurry. Neither did I. In the afternoon, if it was afternoon, I lay down in the grass and watched the sky without naming its color. My eyes followed nothing in particular. Thoughts drifted in and out, like visitors who knew they were welcome but unnecessary. There was no sense of boredom, no sense of purpose, only a quiet participation in whatever appeared. As light softened again, I noticed the body growing heavier, not with exhaustion, but with ease. Rest suggested itself naturally, without command. Before lying down, I felt a final reflection settle gently, like dust after movement. When time is no longer owned, every moment becomes generous. Sleep arrived quietly, not because the day had ended, but because the body was ready. And as consciousness faded, I knew, without thinking, that this day would not be remembered as a sequence of events. It would remain as a single open space, unmarked by hours, untouched by urgency. A day that did not belong to time, and because of that, belonged completely to life. I came upon the place without knowing I was nearing anything. There was no change in the air to announce it, no shift in the land dramatic enough to signal arrival. One step followed another, and then, without ceremony, I was there. It was an open stretch of ground bordered loosely by trees, not a clearing exactly, not a destination, just a place where the land seemed content to pause. Grass grew unevenly. Stones rested where they had always rested. The sky opened above it without emphasis. I stopped walking, not because I was tired, not because something had drawn me forward. The body simply recognized that it did not need to continue. I sat down slowly, letting the earth support my weight. The ground felt cool, firm, reliable. It did not welcome me. It did not resist me. It did not care whether I stayed or left. That, I realized, was its gift. For most of my life, I had believed that arrival mattered, that reaching the right place, whether physical or inward, would resolve something. I thought there would be a moment when the path ended and clarity stood waiting. Here, nothing waited. And because of that, nothing felt incomplete. I remembered a Zen story that once unsettled me. A monk traveled for years to reach a famous teacher. When he finally arrived, the teacher said, "Why have you come?" The monk replied, "To find the way." The teacher pointed to the ground beneath their feet and said, "You are standing on it." Sitting there, I felt the truth of that story, not as understanding, but as ease. There was no urge to move, no urge to stay, only stillness that did not require permission. Time passed, or perhaps it did not. I noticed the light shift slightly, but did not mark the change. A breeze moved through the grass, then faded. Insects appeared, disappeared, returned again. Each movement happened inside a wider quiet that never left. I felt no need to name this place. Names imply boundaries. Boundaries imply arrival. This place asked for neither. At some point, hunger arrived gently, like a reminder rather than a demand. I ate what I had, slowly, tasting without commentary. When the food was gone, the hands rested easily in my lap. There was no sense of loss. Another Zen teaching surfaced, one I had once dismissed as too vague to be useful. When you stop searching for the right place, every place becomes enough. The words settled deeply now. Later, while resting, a thought arose, one that would have frightened me before. What if nothing more happens? The thought hovered briefly, then softened. Nothing more needed to happen. The sky did not improve itself. The ground did not adjust its position. The breath did not try to deepen. Everything remained exactly as it was, and for the first time that felt generous rather than limiting. As evening approached, the light grew warmer, though I did not turn to watch the sun. Shadows lengthened gently across the grass. The air cooled just enough to be noticed. I lay back and closed my eyes. Awareness did not collapse. It widened. Sounds came and went. Sensations shifted slightly. Thought appeared occasionally, thin and transparent, then dissolved without resistance. I realized then that arrival had always been an idea, not an experience. The body never arrived anywhere. It simply rested when movement was no longer necessary. A final reflection drifted through me, calm and complete. You do not arrive at peace. You stop leaving it. Sleep came easily, unannounced. Not because the day had ended, but because the body trusted the ground beneath it. And in that place that did not ask for arrival, free of milestones, free of destinations, free of the long habit of becoming, I rested as simply as the land itself, whole without effort, and finally, quietly, home. I woke without opening my eyes. Awareness returned before sight, before thought, before any sense of location. There was only breath, rising, falling, moving on its own, unconcerned with whether I noticed it or not. For a long moment, I stayed there, resting inside that movement, feeling how little effort it required. Then a realization surfaced, quiet and unmistakable. I was not breathing. Breathing was happening. This was not a new teaching. I had heard it many times, spoken gently by teachers, written carefully in books. But until that morning, it had remained an idea, something understood by the mind and politely accepted. Now, it was undeniable. The breath had never belonged to me. I opened my eyes. Light filtered softly through branches overhead. The place where I had rested still held me without comment. Grass bent slightly in the breeze. A small insect traced a careful path across a stone, paused, then continued. Nothing waited for instruction. I sat up slowly, noticing how the body adjusted itself, spine lengthening, shoulders settling, without command. Each movement arrived at the right moment, neither rushed nor delayed. The body knew what it was doing, so did the breath. As I stood and began walking again, the rhythm continued, step, breath, step, uncoordinated, yet perfectly aligned. I did not guide it. I did not correct it. I let it carry me forward. For years, I had believed that practice meant learning how to breathe correctly, deeper, slower, more aware. I had spent countless hours adjusting, counting, refining. All of it had been sincere. All of it had also been unnecessary. A Zen story surfaced, one that finally revealed its weight. A monk asked, "How do I breathe in harmony with the universe?" The teacher replied, "Stop interfering." I smiled quietly, feeling the truth of it move through my chest. As the day unfolded, I noticed how many other things I had been claiming without realizing it. My thoughts arose without invitation. My heartbeat kept its own counsel. Hunger arrived. Thirst followed. Fatigue came and went. None of them consulted me, yet I had lived as if managing them was my responsibility. At midday, I rested near a low hill and watched clouds drift slowly across the sky. They formed shapes briefly, then dissolved, unconcerned with coherence. I did not follow them. I let my eyes soften, my attention widen. Breath continued. In that widening, a subtle shift occurred. The sense of inside and outside loosened. Breath no longer felt like something happening within a body separate from the world. It felt like part of the same movement that stirred the grass, shaped the clouds, cooled the air. Not personal, not owned, shared. I remembered another teaching, one that had once felt poetic but distant. When you breathe, the world breathes with you. Sitting there, I understood it not as metaphor, but as observation. Later, while walking through a shaded stretch of land, I felt fatigue settle more deeply. Muscles softened, pace slowed. The body suggested rest, and I listened without negotiation. Lying down, I felt breath deepen naturally, unprompted. Each inhale expanded the chest gently. Each exhale released weight into the ground. I did nothing. Nothing needed to be done. A quiet gratitude arose, not directed at anything in particular, not gratitude for the breath or about the breath, just gratitude as a tone, like warmth spreading without source. I realized then how much effort had once gone into trying to earn peace. Through discipline, through vigilance, through control. Yet the breath, constant, generous, faithful, had never asked for effort in return. As evening approached, the air cooled slightly. Breath adjusted without comment. I wrapped my robe closer around my body. The movement felt natural, not strategic. Before sleep came, one final understanding settled gently, like breath itself settling into stillness. What sustains you does not belong to you, and because of that, it can never be taken away. Sleep arrived quietly, not as something I entered, but as something that continued when attention loosened its grip. Breath moved on. The world moved with it, and held within that shared rhythm, free of ownership, free of control, free of the long illusion of separation. I rested, carried effortlessly by a life that had always been breathing for me. The last morning did not announce itself. There was no sense of finality, no inward voice saying, "This is the end." Awareness returned the way it always had, quietly, without ceremony, like a lake settling after a stone has already sunk and disappeared. Breath moved. Light existed somewhere beyond closed eyes. The body rested, complete. For a long while, I did not move. Not because I was holding on to something, and not because I was reluctant to begin. There was simply no edge between rest and rising. When my eyes opened, the world was already present. The sky was pale and wide, neither inviting nor distant. The ground held its familiar firmness. A faint breeze moved through grass, not seeking attention, not avoiding it. Everything felt finished, not ended, finished, like a cup filled exactly to its rim, needing nothing more. I stood slowly and felt the body adjust itself without instruction. Joints loosened, muscles remembered their shape, breath aligned naturally with movement. Nothing needed correction. As I walked a few steps, I noticed something subtle and profound. There was no longer a watcher. Sounds occurred, sensations arose. Thoughts appeared faintly, then dissolved, but no one stood behind them, managing or interpreting. For years, I had believed awakening meant seeing clearly. Now I understood it meant no longer needing to look. A final Zen story surfaced, not as memory, but as resonance. A monk asked, "What happens after awakening?" The teacher replied, "The same things, only no one is doing them." Walking, I felt that truth in my bones. Steps happened, breath happened, life unfolded without commentary. I reached a quiet place where land opened gently in all directions. Not a destination, not a viewpoint, just space being space. I sat down, letting the body rest naturally, hands loose, shoulders soft. Nothing gathered, nothing dissolved. Time did not slow, time did not matter. For the first time, I realized there was nothing left to resolve. The missed sunrise, the long discipline, the effort to understand, the gradual letting go. All of it had already completed itself, not as achievement, as release. A warmth spread gently through the chest, not emotion, not joy, but a deep neutrality so kind it felt like love without an object. It did not rise. It did not fall. It stayed. And then, even that loosened. I understood then why teachers never described the end. There is no ending. There's only the quiet moment when the question disappears. No awakening left to achieve. No peace left to earn. No self left to improve. Just this, breathing, resting, being carried. As the body grew tired, it lay down naturally, as leaves lie down when wind releases them. The ground accepted the weight without comment. Breath slowed, not deliberately, but faithfully. Thought did not follow. Sleep arrived without permission, not as darkness, not as unconsciousness, but as the same stillness that had always been here, now uninterrupted. And in that stillness, free of paths, free of teachings, free of beginnings and endings, there was nothing left to wake up to, only life continuing softly, without needing a name, without needing a witness, and without ever having been missed.